Welcome into the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock shows. We're here to get you ready for today's Wise Power 400, which kicks off just a little bit over an hour from now, as the green flag will go down at 3:47 p.m. each time. Of course, we are here for the next hour to discuss all things NASCAR DFS. We have got a ton of drivers who are going to the rear. We got a driver who's got a pass through, so much to get into. Of course, as always, here on Live Before Lock, I'm joined by Chris Pennell. Chris, great as always to be here on a Sunday afternoon. And boy, we've got a lot of news just as we talk about kind of, you know, that the game theory roster construction. The first thing we got to talk about is all these drivers going to the rear, and the newest driver to go to the rear is Kyle Larson.
Yeah, what's up, Jason? Glad to be here. Another good show, hopefully. And yeah, there's a lot of news heading to the weekend. I thought after Daytona, we were going to get out of the chaos and kind of have a more calm race, you know, a typical 1.5, 2 mile track, large intermediate where everything kind of goes smooth sailing, but that is not going to be the case this weekend. You guys watch practice, you watch qualifying. You'd expect maybe some of the scrub drivers that have issues, but we're talking guys like Chase Elliott, William Byron, Brad Keselowski, all these guys spinning out in practice, spinning out in qualifying. So we have some massive place differential plays. We have several guys going to the back this morning. The big news being Kyle Larson, who we just learned about an hour ago, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to have questions about.
Yeah, going down the drivers who are going to the rear, you got Chastain, Haley, Harvick, Keselowski, Logano, Wallace, and Larson. And Kurt Busch is a pass-through. Of course, we saw that again last week. And, you know I was watching a video you had earlier today, and the thing you said is, you know, last week the slogan with Daytona was stack the back. And maybe it was not necessarily the mindset you had coming into today, but or earlier this week, but today, we're just doing the rematch stack the back part two.
It looks to be the case. I'm looking at some of the lineups I'm building when using an optimizer and just hand building. And I'm typically getting like one Dominator for the most part, but then the rest of these guys are in the 30s. So it looks basically exactly what I had last week. And that was not the mindset I had heading into the week, but we got to adapt with the news that we get throughout the weekend.
In terms of roster construction today, and when we're talking about GPP versus cash, do you have a different philosophy at all in cash?
So in cash today, I think sticking with one Dominator is totally fine. Then just kind of sticking with guys in the 30s, like say take a Kyle Busch or a Hamlin, probably one of those guys, and then just strictly going to the back. But in tournaments, I like taking some more stabs with the guys up front. And it's kind of funny. It's like pretty much the exact same strategy I had last week, which was not my intention.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you look at, and of course, if you're an Awesemo Plus member, you can, one of the things I highly recommend is going over looking at that top driver tool that we have, where you can sort this thing on position, salary, projection, ownership, top 6 percentage, top 2 Dominator percentage. But, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, that D word is something we always talk about in roster construction, but really I guess it's the second week in a row that really it's a word we're just not going to talk much about, right?
Correct. Now, the big difference here is that at a track like Daytona last week, fast laps cannot be projected, and the laps that are all pretty sporadic for the most part. Here, we know who's going to get the fast laps. Like guys up front typically running pretty fast. Guys can rip through the field, get the fast laps. So it's definitely more heavily weighted because we actually can project this. Like a guy like Kyle Busch starting third, if he happens to get up front, good chance when he's racking up laps led, he's getting those fast laps too, which do pile up quite quickly. So Dominators, while they're not as important as I thought they were going to be heading to the weekend, there's still something you need to be concerned about. Like in cash games, I'm totally fine rostering guys starting inside the top 5 like Kyle Busch, who can pick up laps and fast laps today.
And of course, if you do have any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. We'll get those as we do go throughout the show. Now, when we look at our upper tier salaries for today's race, so we're looking at the drivers who are 9K and above over on DraftKings. So, you know, we mentioned about Kyle Larson going to the back of the field, 11,600 on DraftKings, 14,000 on FanDuel. Also in this year, you got Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, who, well, pretty much screwed most of us last week with how that played out. Kyle Busch, Ryan Blaney, Mark Truex Jr., William Byron, Joey Logano, Kevin Harvick, and Alex Bowman. You know, speaking of that stack to back, the driver that sticks out to me right now is because he's got that number 32 next to his name, and that's Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, he's going to be by far the chalk today, and it makes sense. Like, it's hard to get away from him. His price is pretty low at $9,200. I know he wasn't like a big dominator last year like we saw in seasons past, but we're talking about a guy that's typically running inside the top 10 and starting all the way back in 32nd. I mean, there's a very strong chance he's getting you 50 plus fantasy points today, and that's without any Dominator points added in.
Yeah, when you look at the rest of this field, you mentioned about looking at guys who are starting at the top of this race. So you look at starting inside the top 10. You got Logano starting 7th, Byron starting 10th, Blaney starting 6th. You already mentioned about Kyle Busch starting 3rd, Hamlin starting 4th, Elliott starting 8th. As you have developed your lineups, is there someone that you found yourself getting to more that you didn't think you would get that much of?
So at first, I wasn't huge on guys like Chase Elliott, but with the news of Kyle Larson going to the rear, I still think Larson's a fine play. I know some people are probably going to jump completely off, but by the time the competition caution rolls around and Larson's like almost all the way back to where he was, you'll be kicking yourself. So I'm not overly concerned about that. But since he is going to the rear, there's a chance he gets kind of caught in the mud for a little bit. So guys like Chase, Hamlin, Busch, Blaney, all these guys are going to get a bit of a boost because you don't have to worry about Larson breathing down your neck at the very beginning.
Mentioned a question that was related to Denny Hamlin here from the chat saying Hamlin was in a similar spot last week and crashed. Are crashes likely on a track like this?
It's not going to be nearly as likely at Daytona because at Daytona, if you watch the race, they're all bunched up in a pack. You're not going to see that here. They can get strung out, and it's just completely different racing, like a whole different racing style.
We've touched on Kyle Larson here a minute already, but the question was, is Larson a bad GPP play now?
I think this makes him a better GPP play because currently projecting him to be the highest owned Dominator of the guys that can potentially lapse. And while I still think he's going to be high owned, I think some of the ownership is going to come off two guys I talked about, like Elliott, Busch, and Hamlin, because they don't have to work their way back through the entire field and start out with negative PD points. So I actually think this helps your case with Larson in tournaments.
As you look at the drivers that are outside of the top 10 that are in this price range. So you got Martin Truex Jr. We already talked about Kevin Harvick, and you also have Alex Bowman at 9,000. What's your thoughts on Truex and Bowman today?
Truex, I'm not a huge fan of. I know it's not the same package as last year, but they kind of just mailed it in at the large intermediates. They seem to be like fully bought into the short flat tracks. And it's hard to say if that's going to be the case this season. I think he's okay starting 12th, but Bowman is a guy I really like today. He might be one of my favorite, if not my favorite tournament play. Starting in 14th, he's $9,000. He is priced right in between the chalk sandwich of Kevin Harvick and Kurt Busch. Everyone is playing those two drivers, and you're probably not going to get a Bowman as well. Like if you're hand building today, it's almost impossible to click on Bowman's name when you have those two guys right there. But Bowman is the most recent winner here at Auto Club. He's great at high tire wear tracks. He's a winner at Chicagoland, which we don't race at anymore. He's done other high tire wear, large intermediate tracks. So I think Bowman, if he's going to go a little bit overlooked, we have a Hendrick car at a cheap price point, starting 14, so you get PD upside. I think he's a great tournament target today.
I mean, like when I look in this tier, obviously to me, and I know we should never say the safe play that's out there, but the play that I would feel most confident, especially because I am playing a lot of cash today, is going to be Kevin Harvick.
Correct.
Who would be number 2 in this list?
Out of the 9K and above?
Yeah.
For me, it's Kyle Busch because I think his path to dominating is quite easy. I'm not saying he's a lock to get up front, but the front row drivers are not your prototypical front row drivers. We have Austin Cendrick, who I know he won last week, and Austin Cendrick is a very talented driver, but he's still a rookie and he's on the pole. It's good equipment, obviously, but when you have the JGR row right behind you of Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch, that is not an easy task to hold those guys off. And you also have Eric Jones starting P2, which he should be a non-factor and drop like a rock. So I really think the path to dominating for Busch or Denny Hamlin, I think more so Busch, is actually pretty easy today, especially with the competition caution. I think Busch could definitely leap a couple guys on the pit road and get up front.
Yeah, one of the things someone mentioned about Logano, yes, he is going to the back of this race. He's one of multiple drivers that are going to the back of the back here. So that's something you do got to think about. But also, for those guys who are going to the back, I mean, is it going to be an easy path for them to basically get right back up to where they were scheduled to start this race?
I think NASCAR made it easier this morning because we did not have a competition caution planned. But we are going to have one now. And if you don't know what that means, on lap 20, we're going to get a free caution where everyone can readjust, go down pit road, and that's going to shuffle things up. So I definitely think that helps their cases, and they should be able to make some ground, especially on pit road when they get, you can easily leap some of the worst teams.
Stan would like to know your thoughts on Ryan Blaney today.
I am rocking the Blaney shirt, so I might be a little bit biased here, but as crazy as it sounds, I don't have much Blaney. He's starting in 6. He is good at the 2-mile tracks. It's just his price point. If I want to play a lot of Blaney, I have to get away from Busch. I have to get away from Hamlin, Chase, Larson, all those guys, and I like them more. So it's hard for me to do. If he was a little bit cheaper, I'd be in starting 6. With Larson going to the rear, that does help him out a little bit, but he's a guy I could see riding around top 5 all day, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough at that $10,000 price point.
For people who are building, multi entries, whether maybe they're playing in a 20 max or 150 max, and they're using an optimizer like we have with Fantasy Cruncher, what type of rules are you setting today? I mean, are you set? Last week you talked about the groups that you had based on where they're starting. Are you doing something similar today?
So my rules are pretty loose. Last week was very rules heavy. Like, it's what you have to do at a super speedway. Today, I'm kind of open. If you want to make a group, the only thing I would do is set up a Dominator group and probably put that as a max of 2, because it's not like we're at a 500 lap race. We only have 200. So Dominator points are not abundant. So I'd say a max of 2 DOMs. And it's basically the guys we've been talking about as potential lap leaders.
Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button. Let's get those likes over 100 here. We almost got 600 people in the chat right now, so we would appreciate you hit that thumbs up. Also, if you're not subscribed to Awesemo, do that right now so you can watch all the content we have over here at YouTube. Of course, coming up later on today, 5 o'clock Eastern time, you got NBA Deeper Dives. Guys, will get you ready for tonight's NBA slate. Let's move on to the next tier, the mid-tier salaries. So today, that's going to be the drivers who are in the 7 and 8K range. So we have Kurt Busch, Brad Keselowski, Tyler Reddick, Ross Chastain, Christopher Bell, Austin Dillon, Chris Buescher, Austin Cendrick, Eric Amroll, Chase Briscoe, and Bubba Wallace. I guess there's a couple of different ways we could kind of start off here. If anyone checked out your video over here on Awesemo earlier today, you talked about Tyler Reddick and Austin Dillon are 2 drivers that you like, but Bubba Wallace is going to be a chalk driver today.
Yeah, so when I recorded that video, it was pre-qualifying. So I did say some of these things would change, and they changed a lot more than I thought they would, because we have some mega chalk place differential plays that look fantastic and definitely a little bit better than Austin Dillon, Tyler Reddick. Now, as far as tournaments go, Tyler Reddick, he is $8,400. People aren't going to want to click on his name. Starting in 11th, I think is a fantastic play. But getting to Bubba Wallace that you mentioned, I never really liked playing Bubba Wallace, but I don't think anyone does. I think everyone has that same opinion. But starting in 34th, he's going to be a top 5 owned driver, and he does have top 15 potential in that 23 car. I think the price is fine. 34th, good chance he could gain 15 plus spots today.
Jay asking about Eric Amroll starting 31st, 7,400 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel.
I personally find him to be pretty much the same exact play as Bubba. In projections, I have them finishing pretty much next to each other. But since Bubba's starting 3 spots further back, I give him an edge. But if you want to play both together, that is totally fine. But head to head, I'm going to take Bubba over Almirola.
DJ asks, he says, overall theory question, do you guys keep a tight core of players, or do you play a wider range of guys to cover crash variance?
It would depend what contest I'm in. If I'm doing 150 max, I am going to open up the book a bit just so to hedge myself, because it is NASCAR and it's early in the season. We have the next gen car and we're kind of playing an educated guessing game right now. But if you're playing a 20 max, I like tightening up that core and then just making a little bit of pivots here and there. So it really depends what kind of contest I'm in. Yeah.
And like I'm more of a cash gains player. So like today, for instance, there's going to be certain chalk that I want to get to, a Harvick, Bubba Wallace, but also you bring up the great points about Kyle Busch starting third there. As you look at Kurt Busch, another one that we got to talk about here. He does have the pass through. So he's 8,800 on DraftKings, 9,200 on FanDuel. Because of his starting position, the competition caution, which is very early on the race, 20 laps in, what is your even with the pass through, does that affect at all with your thoughts on Kurt Busch today?
So I might have dove a little bit too deep into this, but I was watching a race where Kurt Busch had to do a pass-through penalty in 2020 at Atlanta, which is actually a similar track to Auto Club, but it's a 1.5 mile track. So this is a 2 mile track. So it's a little bit bigger. So it's a little bit more leeway for Kurt Busch. He did go a lap down, but he worked his way back up to P2 theoretically, right behind the leader. And then the competition caution on lap 25, which is similar to this, got him right back in the lead lap. But there's a chance he doesn't even go a lap down. But even if he does, competition caution lap 20, he's going to be just fine. And he's starting dead last. He's a guy that typically runs fair finishes inside the top 10 at these track types. I know he's in a new car this year, but if he does anything inside the top 20, he's a fantastic play, and I'm not worried about the pass through penalty at all.
Christopher Bell starting 19th. He's 8,000 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. And Cole goes, practice times look good. Plus, he sounded excited during his interviews. Usually before the race, they're all going to sound excited. But looking for your thoughts there on Christopher Bell.
Yeah, I can get behind the practice times. I'm not sure how much I actually want to put into practice because we got to keep in mind it's only a 15-minute session. And they had to keep starting and stopping because everyone kept wrecking. It's like they were driving on ice. So we didn't get too much data there. Like most guys ran 15, 18 laps. Bell was 4th in the 5 lap and 5th in the 10 lap. So I'm not going to hold that against him. I mean, if you're fast, you're fast. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. $8,000. I preferred him at the short flats last year, but the price is nice. Starting 19th. I think he's a fine pivot off of Chastain with top 10 upside in a JGR car.
Of course, you got the pole sitter in this group, Austin Cendrick. He's 7,600 on DraftKings, 8,000 over on FanDuel. You talked about Kyle Busch potentially being able to lead a bunch of laps early on this race. What about Austin Cendrick? In terms of, obviously he would be a dominator you'd be looking at based on starting on the pole.
Correct. I think the competition caution is going to hurt him a bit because he can easily get shuffled out. Easily get leaped on pit road, depending on what happens. It's just an added variance to him, which I was already cautious about him leading laps early on. He was the guy that I was playing around, looking at around 15% in my lineups. Now with the competition caution, I just think he's going to get shuffled out at some point because if he doesn't lead a good chunk of the first stage and finish top 5, top 6 today, he's not going to be optimal. And I don't really think he's going to be a big fast lap guy anyway. I mean, I know he's a talented driver, but he's still a rookie. Got to hold off the JGR crew. I dropped them below 10% in my exposures.
Now, if you're looking for a leverage spot in this tier, just looking over our ownership projections, Chase Briscoe is the one that sticks out to me. He's starting 24th, 7,200 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. Yeah,
I'm actually a big fan of Briscoe. I'm glad you brought him up because he's going to be pretty sneaky. Because if you're looking at, it's similar to what I said about Bowman. He's in between a chalk sandwich of Justin Haley starting in 35th. And Bubba Wallace starting in Eric Amroll in 31st and Bubba Wallace in 34th. It's like, why would I want to click on Briscoe? But in 12 races last year at similar tracks, 9 times out of 12, he finished inside the top 25 times inside the top 15 and average finish of 17.4. Bubba Wallace and Eric Amroll are very high variance drivers. So something easily could happen to them. And if that's the case, I mean, Chase Briscoe, if he can pull off a P16 starting in 24th, it's definitely a good leverage play.
Getting a question in on Chris Buescher. He starts 20th here, 7,700 over on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel.
So the only problem with Buescher is that the price is a little bit up there. So I'm having a hard time getting to him a ton, but he's actually he's very similar to Austin Dillon. So it makes sense that their price is pretty close to each other, but 10 times out of 12 last year, he was inside the top 20 at similar tracks. 8 times out of 12, he's in the top 15. Also had 5 top 10s, average finish of 13th. He's a pretty good tournament play to get off some of the chalk.
I was thinking about this because I'm looking at my salaries here, and one of the drivers that's going to the rear is in this group, and that's Brad Keselowski, who was slated to start 9th, which that's something you have to take in terms of place differential points in terms of this race. But are we overthinking all these drivers going to the rear, and that ultimately, because of that competition caution being so early on in the race, it's not going to be a big deal?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, every time I start to drop exposure on a driver that goes to the rear, I get burned instantly. I'll be watching the race, and then once the caution comes out and then it gets shuffled out 30 laps in, all these guys are back to their spots, and I'm like, well, I just screwed myself by overreacting. So I really don't think you should overreact too much. Like Larson, I saw some people saying they're just completely off Larson. I don't really think that's the right take, because if you were playing Larson, you weren't expecting him to lead laps in the first stage. That's more of a stage 2, stage 3 thing, because he's starting 13th. He's not going to get to the front immediately. So I really don't think you should change your mindset too much. If you want to drop your exposure a little bit, that's fine, because there's more added variance to driving through the field. But I think overreacting is probably the wrong move.
Of course, I mentioned about our top driver tool that we have over at Awesemo.com. If you want to get access to that, you got to be an Awesemo Plus member. You get a weekly pass for $29.95. Of course, if you just want a NASCAR Awesemo pass, you can get that for as low as $9.95 weekly. That top driver tool is a key component for me. Allows you to sort various different ways. And then, of course, as I always say, add on Fantasy Cruncher to your account because especially if you are playing in multi lineups, maybe if you're doing a 3-max, I'll say one of the things that I personally like to do, no matter what sport, I just like, even if I'm only playing like in a 3-max or a 20-max, a lot of times I'm saying I just want to see the type of lineups that comes out, and just see what are those combinations. And, and if there's a certain driver that I want in my lineup, and let's just say it's Kyle Busch today, you hit lock on Kyle Busch and just see what it pops out. It's a great tool, even if you're hand building lineups. So that's just something that I like to do. I don't know if there's in terms of optimizers, is something that you like to do maybe when you're hand building lineups, because there are a lot of people who are watching us that are just hand builders, single entry players.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, hand building is fun, but the computer is a lot smarter than you. So just having that aided help, it is nice. Like, we all think we're smart, but the computer knows a little bit better than us. But yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's usually like at the end of the race. I go, why did I put that guy in my lineup? Why?
Right.
that was literally last week, 10 laps ago. I'm like, okay, it's that point of the race. I can now look at my rosters.
Right.
I can see what the points are, because you can't look at lap 5. If I'm looking at lap 5, I don't want to be cashing in any lineup.
No.
And then I was feeling good 10 laps to go last week, feeling good. I'm like, oh man, it's gonna be a profitable day. Then less than laps happened.
Classic Daytona.
Oh man, that was oh god, that was those last 10 laps.
Oh man, I'm right there with you.
Especially with the caution.
To go your way.
No, and it's just like, it's that point of like, okay, I forget who it was that wrecked out that just was a lineup killer for me last week. I forget who it was, but I was like, yep. Don't even worry about the rest of these lineups. So, of course, if you want to get access to the Awesemo Plus membership, weekly pass starts at $29.95. Of course, it gives you driver projections, player projections, ownership projections for all the sports over at Awesemo.com. So be sure to check that out. Let's move on to what we like to call the lower tier. So these are these drivers that are underneath 7,000. So we've got a ton of drivers here. We got Harrison Burton, Justin Haley, Daniel Hemrick, Eric Jones, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Daniel Suarez, Cole Custer, Michael McDowell, Ty Dillon, Todd Gilliland, Corey LaJoie, Cody Ware, Josh Bilicki, Garrett Smithley, and BJ McLeod. Let's start off with, I think, a guy that a lot of people are looking at and developing their lineups around. That's the guy starting 15th, Daniel Suarez, 6,100 on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of Suarez. I'm hoping he was overlooked because Ricky Stenhouse right above him did post some pretty strong practice times. Third in the 5-lap and fourth in the 10-lap, and Suarez wasn't even close to that. So I'm hoping people will gravitate away from that, just again, because I'm not putting too much into practice time. So I'm hoping that's more of an overreaction. But Suarez is a guy that was consistently inside the top 15 or battling for a top 15 at similar tracks last year. Like, we're talking 7 top 15s, 8 top 20s. He's over $2,000 cheaper than his teammate, which doesn't make much sense to me because theoretically you'd assume they're going to finish pretty close to each other. $6,100. Price is too low on both sides, $4,500 on FanDuel. If he holds his position, we're looking at close to 30 DraftKings points. And I think he's a little bit less, I think he has less wreck potential than Ricky Stenhouse. So I feel pretty good about being overweight on Suarez today.
Mentioned a question coming in from my guy, Pete the Heat, asking about would an early Dominator stage win make Cendrick optimal if he finishes the race in the top 10?
So if he finishes the race in the top 10, you're assuming if he wins the stage, he probably led pretty much every single lap. It's going to come down to the fast laps. Like, if he's finishing on the lower end of that top 10, we're really starting to push it, because you got to think about the other guys he's priced around, like Eric Amroll in 31st, Bubba in 34th. Like, those guys can, if they're getting top 15s, they can outscore Cendrick still, because those Dominator points will go away a little bit with the loss of the place differential points. So Cendrick's probably going to have to hold a top 5, top 6, depending on what the other PD guys do around him.
There is certain drivers down here that no one is really getting to. Some of them I think is very understandable, but someone that literally no one is getting to, Daniel Hemrick, starting 5th. Is this a situation of, maybe X amount, or maybe you just say, you know what, no more than 5%?
So I've been running crunches since like 2 a.m. last night, and I am not getting like any Hemrick at all. Because projected finish, I have him close to Haley, considering their teammates and similar equipment. You'd expect them to finish somewhat close to each other. I know Hemrick had a lot of success in the Xfinity Series last season, and he did post a P9 in the 5-lap in practice, but I can't realistically project Hemrick to finish like in the top 10 above guys like Busch, Hamlin, Larson. It just doesn't make sense to me. So if I give him like a P17 finish, that's not a bad day in real life, but for fantasy starting 5th, that's awful.
Yeah, I mean, you got Eric Jones, who's right $100 less than him, who's starting 2nd. He's 6,400 on DraftKings.
Yeah, and they're basically the same play where they're both terrible. Eric Jones in the past at Auto Club has a good history, and I'm not going to deny that, but you got to keep in mind he was in a Joe Gibbs car. Now he's not even close with Petty GMS. So, I mean, realistically, I think a good day for Eric Jones is a top 15, and that's just not going to cut it starting 2nd.
Yeah, we mentioned about Stack in the back. Even though he's going to the rear, but his initial starting position was 35. Justin Haley, I've seen a couple questions coming in the chat about him of his value as a play today.
Haley's one of my favorite just overall plays today because I'm gonna have to dip down low to fit in some of these studs up top, and Haley's the guy that's popping up the most for me. I mean, starting in 35th, worst thing he can do is lose you one spot, and if we're just gonna give him like an average finish of around P20. Which I think there's upside for more there. We're looking at close to 40 DraftKings points, which is fantastic, below 7K.
Ty Dillon, who is starting 18th, he is 5,500 over on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel. And Sean was asking for your thoughts on him today.
Yeah, I'm not finding myself getting to Ty Dillon much. I have a little sprinkle of him in 150 max builds, but starting in 18th, it's just unappealing. Like I'd rather play everybody else in the 5K range over him. I mean, he's better than the 4K plays, but I think there's a decent chance he finishes outside the top 20. Meanwhile, the guys priced around him might be able to gain a spot or two.
Who is on the hate list today in terms of a fantasy upside that's in this tier?
The low tier Ty Dillon, really all the scrubs I'm just not playing today, if you want to include them. But Ty Dillon, I would say, is probably in the kind of like in the hate range for me. Starting in 18th, I just don't see the upside out of him. I mean, there's a chance he could gain a spot or two, but if him, Corey LaJoie, and all these guys can finish right around each other, they just have more PD upside.
Of course, so if you do got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. Of course, you're here for the next 30 minutes, by the way. Lock on DraftKings, 3:45 p.m. Eastern time. So about 45 minutes from now is when I'll lock there over on DraftKings. Just was double checking to see if they had changed the lock time there. It's always something you gotta pay attention to. Of course, green flag is going to be coming here at 3:47 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, we are sponsored by Prize Picks. You gotta check out all the prop contests they have over there at prizepicks.com. Be sure to use the promo code Awesemo for a up to $100 instant first match deposit. Use that promo code Awesemo. Of course, when you sign up, deposit, and play over at Prize Picks, you get 1 free month of Also Plus Platinum. You see it right there at the top of the screen, that URL that you need to hit to take advantage of that offer. You'll receive an email within 24 to 48 hours about claiming your free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And as we look at some of the props over there today, I know there was 3 that stuck out to you, one involving William Byron.
So Byron, I'm not sure if he's currently still at 40.5, but he was earlier in the day, but I'm liking that a lot. I mean, last year at Large Ovals, William Byron was a guy that typically running near the very front. He was just always a tough DFS play because he was like 10K. Starting 2nd or 3rd, it's just really hard to get to him and Larson. But at 40.5, realistically, he doesn't have to do too much. Like starting in 10th place, for him to get over 40 points, we're looking at a top 7. And you have to imagine he's going to get some fast laps mixed in. There's always a chance he could get up front and dominate. He was great at Homestead last year, which is a similar track to Auto Club. So I think William Byron getting over 40 is pretty good. We had Eric Jones under a certain amount of points as well, and Ross Chastain.
Yeah, the other one that you mentioned there was the over laps led on Kyle Busch. By the way, that has gone up considerably.
What's that now?
It's at 26.5.
Oh yeah, I had 19, right?
Yeah. Well, you said to me it was 19.5. So obviously people have been pounding that prop over there at Prize Picks.
Yeah, well, I definitely like the over there because the concern, I know I had it last night at 19, I believe, and they pulled it off because there was rumors about him dropping to the rear. Obviously, that's not the case now. And again, the only guys in front of him are Eric Jones and Austin Cindric. Like, if you're going to tell me that, it makes sense for Kyle Busch to be the main threat there. He was fast in practice. I'm not putting too much into practice, but he was second on the 5 lap, second on the 1 lap, and second on the 10 lap. So obviously he's got a fast car. We'll see if that holds up during the race, but Kyle Busch is really good at Auto Club, and he's in a great spot to lead laps early on, and he could easily get that in the first stage.
Of course, be sure to check out all the props they have over there at Prize Picks. Of course, use that promo code Awesemo when you sign up over at prizepicks.com. Of course, we're here to answer any questions you have. By the way, on the betting side, I know the one that you did mention to me earlier before the show was Kyle Busch to win, which I saw at one sports book was plus 650.
So I went down a little bit from plus 700 yesterday, but I do like that a lot. I mean, I know it's the first race of the season, so it's hard to tell what these cars are going to do, but we've been saying ever since whenever Kyle Busch gets practice back, that's going to be huge for him. It was a very small session yesterday, but just any added on track time for Kyle Busch is definitely going to be a bump, and good spot starting in third. Again, has a clear path to getting up front if he can get by Cindric and Eric Jones. So I don't hate taking a stab at Kyle Busch there. And if you're going to bet on talent early in the season, because we don't know much about these cars, guys like Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson are definitely guys that can handle anything they're given.
And by the way, if you're just tuning into the show, multiple drivers are going to the rear: Chastain, Haley, Harvick, Keselowski, Logano, Wallace, and Larson. Larson was the newest one. They came down about an hour ago. And also Kurt Busch has got a pass through. So those are something to kind of think about as you are developing your lineups. But that competition caution will come out 20 laps in. So it may ultimately not really mean much by the time we hit lap 21 or so. So we'll see what happens there. Gets some questions in here. Matt says, what's better for cash, 2 Dominators and Harvick or Busch, or 1 Dominator with Harvick and Busch? Which I'm guessing he's got to be mentioning Kurt Busch.
Gotcha. I personally, for me in cash, I'm going with 1 Dom builds. And if you can fit 1 Dom in with Harvick and Busch, Kurt, that is perfectly fine. But I would not be forcing scrubs in your lineup. So as long as you can go balanced, I think that's fine. But for cash, I'm with 1 Dom.
Which it kind of makes me think, how low do you want to go in terms of these low salary drivers? I mean, does there just become a point of, is it, you know what, from Ty Dillon down, I really don't want to get to the end of those drivers?
And as far as cash goes, if I'm getting below LaJoy, I'm rebuilding my lineup. I am not playing a Ware, Balicki, Smithley, or McLeod in cash today.
Just start over, hit clear, just start over with what you're doing there. Yep. As I mentioned, if you got any questions, mention a question that came in over our Discord about Daniel Suarez, comparing him or Cole Custer. I think anyone who listened to what you said earlier today and here on the show, it's got to be Suarez, right?
Yeah, if it's tournaments, I like Suarez a lot. Custer might get a bit of an ownership bump from people that played Xfinity yesterday because he crushed it. But for me, I think Suarez has the higher finishing position potential.
Let's see here. By the way, Rail Chicago Keselowski is to the rear. He was one of those drivers that did go to the rear. So as I just mentioned, if those drivers going to the rear. Josh asked about Briscoe or Burton. Of course, Harrison Burton starting 22nd. He's 6,900 on DraftKings, 5,800 over on FanDuel.
I personally signed with Briscoe. I mean, they're very similar plays, but Briscoe has more cup experience. So I'm just going to side with that.
Speaking of the to the rear guys, can Logano make up his place differential and be optimal?
So for him to make up place differential, I mean, he's starting at 7, so it's not like he's starting mid-pack. So for Joey Logano to be optimal, he's at $9,400. He's going to have to be a top 3, top 4 guy, pick up fast laps, and probably get up front at some point. So he does not have the easiest path today.
Are GPP lineups with Larson as the only Dominator viable?
Yes, that's fine, but I don't think Larson, I know he's going to the rear and people might be jumping off of him, but I don't think his ownership is going to sway too much. He's still going to be pretty high owned today.
Wallace or Haley for cash? So you got Bubba Wallace, who's starting 34th. Justin Haley, 35th. These are their starting positions where they'll be scored from. Wallace going to the back here. Similar price range, only a $300 difference over on DraftKings.
Yeah, they're very close in plays, but I'm going to give the edge to Bubba. I mean, we've seen him do it before in the same car, so it's not like it's much of a guessing game. And last year, looking at some large oval finishes, 14th, 16th, 14th, 14th. I mean, I know I don't love playing Bubba, but he's a good play on paper.
Next up, and I'm sure Brooklyn, there's a lot of people in chat that may have a similar question that are new to NASCAR DFS about explaining Dominator points.
So Dominator points, these are the guys that can lead laps and get fast laps. So you get 0.25 for a lap led, 0.45 for a fast lap, and typically those can correlate to the guy up front leading laps, even picking up fast laps. Now that can change if someone pits, has fresher tires, and they're just running through the field. But for the most part, you can kind of tell who's going to get the fast laps. And these are the guys that are expensive. You're not going to see a Michael McDowell come out and dominate. These are your Kyle Larsons, Elliott's of the world.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about Bubba Wallace. I mean, look, he is going to be a chalk play today. People are I mean, there's certain drivers you can look at this slate and say people are going to want to get to them. Kevin Harvick is another one in that name. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is getting a fair amount of ownership.
Yeah, like I said, I think people might overreact a little bit to the practice times because he was fast in practice. I'm not saying Stenhouse is a bad play. I have a fair share of Ricky Stenhouse today. I just think he might be a little bit owned compared to some of these other guys that are similar plays to him, but he does have 5 top 20s at Auto Club the past 6 races. I'm not saying it's a bad play. I'm just saying the ownership might be a little bit too high for where he should be.
Was Gillihan's success at Daytona until the wreck a flash in a pan, or this front row car worth a look?
If you're going to compare anything to Daytona, it's not something you should do because it's a completely different scenario. Everybody can be good at Daytona. I mean, everybody. We've seen like Timmy Hill in the past, who's by far the worst car ever. I've seen him drive up to P10 once. So don't let anything you saw in Daytona sway your thoughts into this week. And front row typically runs pretty well at super speedway, so that wasn't much of a surprise anyway.
Dan says, is it crazy to leave money on the table and just pivot from Larson to Kyle Busch?
No, that's not crazy. That's totally fine. I mean, projections, they're pretty close to each other, and Kyle Busch has a pretty high ceiling for where he starts. I mean, projection wise, Kyle Larson starting at 13th. Yeah, he's got the extra added safety, but with him going to the rear now, there's just more variance that could happen to him making his way through the field.
And speaking about leaving money on the table, which is always a good idea, but the question of that, and Anthony brings up about is 1,100 left too much to leave on the table? For you, as you were developing your lineups, did you kind of feel like there was a number you were around of how much you were leaving on the table?
Yeah, it's pushing it because a lot of my lineups is really not leaving too much money. Like I did a 20 max crunch just before this to see what the averages were. And on average, it was using 49,800 of the salary. So I really wasn't leaving much money on the table at all.
Of course, if you do got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. But someone asked about, is Kurt the only pass through? Yes, he is the only pass through. And I guess I should probably just go look at Bob Pockrass's Twitter account to see if anything else happens, because if you are new to DFS, NASCAR DFS, if there's one NASCAR beat reporter you're going to follow, he is the guy to follow. That's where you're going to get all your news. So if there's anything that ever breaks, he is the guy to go to.
100%.
Yeah. So and looking, nothing. He did mention Kyle Busch does not have to go to the rear. I know he had tweeted about that a little bit earlier on today. So if you do got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. Nick says Bowman or Byron. This is a FanDuel question, and I know watching your video yesterday, today, you were talking about what you're doing on FanDuel today.
Yeah, I'm actually doing some 150 on FanDuel today. Just dipping my toes in the water. But man, I was hoping I wouldn't get a question on Bowman and Byron because they're both the same play almost, and both fantastic plays. For me personally, I am getting a little bit more Bowman. It was a FanDuel question, right?
Yeah, FanDuel, yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit more Bowman on FanDuel just because he's $1,000 cheaper. You have the 4 extra PD spots, and I can see them pretty much doing about the same. I think William Byron has a somewhat higher ceiling as far as leading laps and dominating, but when it comes down to it, I did end up with more Bowman starting in 14th.
So Philip asked a question, which part of it, I think we're probably both going on the same page about. The first part is pick 2 must-haves any price, and he goes, and 1 punt under 5K. How about no?
Yeah, I would prefer to say none for sure. I mean, I just can't play them.
I mean, the problem is, it's that we always talk about. It's like, if you get to a point where you only have 5,000 left to spend, you probably need to start reevaluating the rest of your hand build.
Right. And the thing this week is that usually these guys are starting in the very back. Like they can't lose you spots. That's not the case this week. These guys are starting P30 and above. Like they're going to lose spots.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, if you want to get there, great. But man, if you're going to do that, I would say that's a cash to me, to where you're trying to load up. I'll give you I'll correlate this to yesterday's UFC slate, where in cash, what I did was I took Bobby Green, who lost in the first round, but he was 6,700. But I was able to stack the rest of my lineup and ultimately, cash on a lineup. That's something that I will do. But like I look at today, I'm like, if you tell me I got a roster one, I don't know if I want. I just don't feel good in doing that.
I mean, if I had to, I could back my man Phil here on Twitter, who's been touting Josh Bilicki. I know he thought he'd probably start further back, but I know at the beginning of the week he was on Bilicki a little bit. And I'd say he's probably my favorite out of the absolute scrubs in the 77 card, but it's nothing promising.
Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up, as we always appreciate. Helps out here. Help everyone know about we're live here on the Awesemo YouTube channel. Of course, subscribe to the channel. We're here every Sunday for NASCAR Live Before Lock. I will note Phil actually will be filling in for me next Sunday, is doing a little family getaway for the weekend. So Phil will be filling them for me next Sunday. Nick says, with this new package benefiting those lower tier cars, but good drivers like Jones make it viable to play him in a GPP.
I mean, yeah, I understand with the new package that it does kind of equal the field just a little bit, but Jones is not a guy I can expect to hang up there. I mean, Vegas is a lot smarter than us, and if they had a real read on Jones being a contender to win this race, they'd bump his odds up a little bit. Yeah. They wouldn't let people get these massive odds on Jones, and I think he's probably going to finish around P15 or worse today.
Yeah, I talk about on the betting side, and I talk more of this on the MMA side of the equation. What I sit there and say is, like, I monitor the betting odds all week long, because I want to see, where did Vegas set the line?
Right.
And then how does the public react to that line? They don't build these huge casinos where they're losing money, where they're losing money. They're taking people's money in. But that's, to me, I mean, even if you're not a betting person, you don't like to, maybe you don't live in a state where you can legally bet, it is something I always say for all sports, monitor, kind of let you play out. I know I do it with props. I look at, if it's like an NBA prop, I'm looking at points scored. Those are things that kind of help you develop those DFS lines. At least that's what I do. Josh says, Bell or Buescher in GPPs?
So Bell's picking up a lot of steam this week. I'm seeing that he's going to have higher ownership than I anticipated. I think he's a fine play starting in 19th, but Buescher is going to be low round. He's starting a spot further back, and Buescher was better at these track types last year. So if you just want the pivot there, I think Buescher's fine.
DraftKings question coming in here from JJT says, how much of the back guys in 20 max are you looking at? Which I'm guessing he must be talking about the drivers who are going to the rear at the start of this race.
Right. And probably the guys with if he means like the PD drivers, or if the ones just going specifically to the rear, it could change a little bit. If it's the PD guys, I think probably maxing out like 50 to 60% is fine. If you're talking about guys to the rear, like Kyle Larson, Logano, highest I'm getting is probably like a Larson, and that would be roughly around 30%.
Wayne says Bowman, Kurt Busch, or Ross Chastain over on DraftKings. You mentioned about earlier, you like Bowman in this spot. He is starting 14th, 9,000 over on DraftKings. Kurt Busch, 8,800 over on DraftKings as well. Then Ross Chastain, he is 8,200.
Yeah, so it depends on, I guess, what format you're in. If you're in tournaments, Bowman is an excellent pivot. If you're playing cash games, Kurt Busch is a walk.
Jason Burke says, Chris, did you mean you are not leaving much cash on the table in cash games or in GPPs?
In all formats today. I'm using close to all the salary.
Is Ty Dillon a good punt play?
He's probably my least favorite punt play down there, just because he's starting in 18th, and I feel like McDowell can finish close to Dillon. He's starting 23rd. Same for Custer, same for Gillen. So it's like, I'll just hit the guys at the PD for.
Is Truex a good pivot off Kyle Larson?
So there's a bit of a price difference there, because Martin Truex is about $2,000 cheaper than Larson. So I think that's probably a better 2v2 question to see who you could improve upon once you put in Truex. If I have to get off of Larson, I mean, the direct pivot for me is a Chase Elliott or a Kyle Busch.
Ricky or Suarez for a GPP play?
I'll go with Suarez, who I'm expecting to be lower owned than Stenhouse with his fast practice times.
Best bets for dominators. I mean, I guess we know Kyle Busch. I mean, that's going to be one. I mean, who also are you considering as a drivers put in a dominator pool?
Yeah, if I have a dominator group, like I'm playing around with an optimizer, I'm throwing in Kyle Busch, I'm throwing in Hamlin, Elliott, Blaney, Larson, Truex, Byron, and you could maybe put in Bowman there too.
Next question is, what would it take for 3 dominators to be optimal today? I know points aren't quite there, but this person says he's curious on your thoughts on that.
There have to be more laps for this race, which that can't change. So
yeah, and of course, if people miss, you talked about going with a 1 dominator build today, and then stack to back part 2 after what we saw last week and the things that we're seeing here today. Bubba Wallace or Ross Chastain? So you got Ross Chastain, he's 8,200. Bubba Wallace 7,000.
I'm going to go with Bubba Wallace there, and Ross Chastain's in a backup car. I don't really think it's going to affect him too much, but at the very least, Bubba just seems safer.
GPP question, Bell and Suarez or Briscoe and Haley?
If it's GPPs, Bell and Suarez is going to be the one that people don't want to click on as much because there's way less PD upside there. So I'll roll with that. But I think they have decent finishing position potential upside.
We've talked a little about Cole Custer throughout the show, but David wondering Custer or Michael McDowell starting 23rd, 5,700 DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel.
I want to say Custer. I feel like I can trust him a little bit more. It doesn't feel great saying to trust Custer, and I hate saying I can trust McDowell either. But both guys are pretty similar last season. McDowell was able to grab more top 20s and more top 15s than a top 10, but I do think there's a little bit more upside with Custer and a Stuart Haas car rather than a front row car.
Nick mentioned that his winner prediction today is Kyle Larson, Bowman finishing in second. I say leave your picks in chat. Who do you think is going to win this race here today? And how this one's going to play out. How much Stenhouse is too much Stenhouse?
I think if you're starting to push 20%, you might be a little bit over, a little bit too much over.
Was there a driver you were surprised that you were getting so much of?
Let me check my builds really quick. But I know there was one guy, I believe it was Harrison Burton was a guy I didn't really think I was going to like too much. And I was actually getting more than 15% of him, which was kind of surprising to me. But the more I looked at it, I think it actually makes sense. I mean, $1,600 starting in 22nd. It's just mainly to get off that chalk of Haley and Bubba Wallace. And I didn't want to go too overboard on those guys. So I think it kind of made sense after I thought about it that Burton was kind of showing up because he can definitely get a top 20 in a Wood Brothers car.
Yeah, I want to say when I did my crunch earlier today, it was like, I think it was Kevin Harvick it was like crazy amount of lines he was in. And I was like, woo, that is a lot of Kevin Harvick. I mean, look, it's understandable, but it's also one of those things like, man, in a 150 max, I'm going, oof, I don't know if I want to get that much.
Right. I agree there.
Of course, if you do got any questions, be sure to line those up, whether it's here in the YouTube chat, also in our Discord chat as well. You can check that out over there. Just trying to pull up my crunch I did earlier on what that was pulling up there. But yeah, it was like Kevin Harvick. It was absolutely crazy the amount that he was getting to in terms of that. But if there's maybe a driver that we haven't talked about that you've got a question about, be sure to line those up in chat. We will get to that as we get going on through this show here. Says, I feel like Blaney isn't getting a ton of attention, so I'm assuming it's a Blaney day.
That's how it is sometimes. Like everyone, you never talk about a guy and then they just randomly start dominating. And I can certainly see that because Blaney is good at the 2-mile tracks. I mean, last time we were at Auto Club, Alex Bowman did win, but Blaney was right there with him as being like the best car on the track. But he had a pit for, I believe it was a loose wheel at the very end. So if you look at the numbers, it looks like a bad finish, but he was really, really fast and he's great at Michigan. So I mean, I think Blaney's a fine tournament play. It's just the price a little bit tough to get to.
Yeah, without really putting too many factors into my crunch, it was 80% Kevin Harvick. Yeah, I mean, get a lot of Kurt Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain. I think we all kind of, we know why that is there in terms of that. And so that's one of those things where you're doing that. You just got to kind of, you got to play with the optimizer and kind of get where you want it to be there in terms of that. Wayne says, who can score more, dominators who don't lead many laps or people from the rear who come up in their position?
It just depends on how much he dominates. Like, if, let's say Kyle Busch leads 150 laps and gets a good chunk of fast laps, he's going to be a much better play than Harvick if he finishes 10th. So it's really just comes down to how much is the guy going to lead. And I mean, yes, they're safer in the back, but their ceilings are a little bit limited if you don't think they're going to get up front.
Reddick or Amroll?
If it's tournaments, give me Reddick. I think he's a fantastic tournament play today. If it's cash, take Amroll.
Briscoe or Wallace? So we got Briscoe starting 24th, Wallace starting 34th, and it's only a $200 difference over on DraftKings, that being a $200 difference in favor of Briscoe. On FanDuel, though, Bubba Wallace is $500 more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, just to keep it simple, cash games, you're playing Bubba today. He can only lose 2 spots. If you're playing tournaments, Briscoe right in between 2 chalky drivers. He's got top 15 upside. I know the price is a little bit up there for Chase Briscoe, but starting in 24th, upside's there, and I like him in tournaments.
Chastain and Haley or Bell and Bubba for GPPs? Chastain and
Haley, Bubba. I'm going to go with the Bubba route. I just think he's a fantastic play today.
Cole brings up the point. He said he goes with as outspoken as drivers have been in regards to how different the car is. I'm not putting a lot of stock into past performances. Was that a mentality you had coming into the season with the new cars?
Yeah, it certainly is, because obviously it's not going to be the exact same. But the thing is, as much as NASCAR tries to change things, on things try just still stay the same. And I just have a hard time seeing the drivers that weren't good in the past just randomly not going to be good again. Like Kyle Larson, yeah, it's a new car and everything, but he's still arguably the most talented driver in the field. Same with Kyle Busch, and I still think we're going to see more of the same rather than just everything flipping.
Single entry question coming in from Matt here. He says Suarez, Custer, or McDowell.
I'll go with Suarez there, since it's I believe a single entry tournament. You
said? Yeah, single entry.
Yeah, I think Suarez is a good spot there.
Briscoe or Haley?
I would go with Justin Haley, just overall raw points. I mean, starting 1 spot from the very back, it's going to be hard for him to fail today.
Last spot in, Hamlin or Kyle Busch?
I would go with Kyle Busch there. Just starting in 3rd, I think he's in the best spot to dominate early if it's not going to be Austin Cendrick.
And of course, if you missed out on the drivers that are going to the rear, Chastain, Haley, Harvick, Keselowski, Logano, Wallace, and Larson. Kurt Busch is a pass-through, but I know we've talked about this point a couple of times throughout the show of because of the competition caution being at lap 20, maybe don't overanalyze that too much.
Yeah, he'll get his lap blood back. Or he'll get his lap back.
Yeah. Single entry, last spot, Hamlin or Kyle Busch. I think we just announced that one, but I would rather go the Kyle Busch route.
Yeah, I would too. I'm more confident in him leading laps today.
So, of course, if you do got any questions, just a couple more minutes here left in the show. Of course, coming up here in an hour and a half from now, it is going to be NBA Deeper Dive. As the guys are going to be getting you ready for tonight's NBA slate. So keep it locked here to Awesemo all day long. Of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel, do that. Hit that notification bell so you know when a show is live here on the channel. Of course, smash that thumbs up button. We got, as we finish this show up here for today, any love for Austin Cendrick? He's on the poll. We talked about him a little bit earlier. Pete had the question about, if he can win stage 1, can that be enough to potentially get him as an optimal driver?
Yeah, so I liked Austin Cendrick more last night when we didn't know there was going to be a competition caution. But with the news of that, I mean, there's just a pretty high likelihood he's going to get shuffled out of the lead, and I don't think he's going to get that back. So I'm not very high on Cendrick. I'm still playing him a little bit, but I am playing on being underweight to the field.
Chastain or Kurt Busch?
I'll take Kurt Busch there. And I know he's got the pass-through penalty, but once he gets back in the lead lap, if he goes lap down, he's a better play.
We'll leave on this question here from Wayne. He says, why do we all like Harvick over the other drivers that are in the rear?
Well, Harvick's got the more pedigree. He's done it in the past. He's great at the high tire wear venues. And I know he wasn't as dominant as he was as seasons past, but Harvick is a guy that can easily get a top 10, top 8 finish once the race starts to play out and he gets his positions back. So, I mean, like Harvick, yeah, I know starting 32nd, it's not as far back as like a Bubba Wallace or Justin Haley, but he has much higher finishing position potential than those guys.
Just got a notification on my phone that just made me go, whoa.
NASCAR news?
No,
Oh, okay.
NFL news. Ali Marpet, the Bucks Pro Bowl guard, is retiring after 7 years in the league. Wow. That's That's an interesting news alert coming here on my phone. But that is going to do it for the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Of course, keep it locked here. Later on today, we got NBA Deeper Dive. Do want to thank our sponsor, Prize Picks. Be sure to check out Prize Picks and the props they have on today's NASCAR race. So until next week, this has been the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Have a good day, everybody.